Hello everybody, and welcome back to Cam Critiques. The original The World Ends With You, released for the Nintendo DS back in 2007, is one of my favorite games. Its aesthetic, story, gameplay, and the way all of those things tie into one another make it easily my favorite game on the DS. It's got most of my favorite elements from both the best Kojima games and the best Nomura games. But I never really felt like it needed a sequel. The story was complete, and the gameplay really only worked on DS. I wanted the group of people that created The World Ends With You to continue making games, but I didn't need those games to be in the World Ends With You series. Sadly, nothing else came of that group for many years. They teased a sequel to The World Ends With You with the mobile port 9 years ago, but it seemed like it had never materialized. The original reviewed well, but it didn't sell that many copies, and the re-releases on mobile and Nintendo Switch sold even worse and frankly weren't very fun to play. Then, all of a sudden, late last year, Neo: The World Ends With You was announced. A full sequel to the original, set in a revamped Shibuya. I was pretty excited, but I have to admit, I was also a little worried. Sure, the original creators are back, and the art style looked incredible, but crafting a sequel to a game 15 years after the original seems hard enough. Creating one for a game that didn't need a sequel and had its core gameplay mechanics tied to an obsolete system seems near impossible. Part of me was worried this would be just fan service. I wasn't convinced there was a reason to go back to the Shibuya UG, and stuff like Playable and Namimoto reeked of fan service that would be hard to justify on the game's story. But I still bought the game when it came out, and I have now 100% completed it. I got the Platinum Trophy, I filled out the Noisepedia, I beat every challenge on the hardest difficulty. And it's incredible. It's even better than the original. This game is everything I could have wanted. It is one of the greatest games ever made. The combat of Neo: The World Ends With You, which I'll just call Neo Twooey from now on, is, much to my surprise, some of the finest combat I've experienced in an RPG. Like the original game, you collect pins throughout the game, either obtained from stores or dropped by enemies. And these pins are the different skills you can equip. Some fire ranged attacks at enemies, some slash enemies, some heal you, etc. But in the original game, the main gimmick of the combat was having to control multiple characters at once, one on the top screen of the DS and the other on the bottom screen. And you also activated your pins with different touchscreen inputs. The combat system really couldn't be done on modern hardware. The World Ends With You Final Remix on Switch tried to do it and massively fell short. But this game does something a little different. Instead of working in teams of 2 like the original, you work in a larger group, and each party member is given a pin that's activated with one of 6 buttons. This system is incredibly clever. One of the most interesting things about the original game's combat was how it tied into the story. As Neku had to learn to work with and trust his partners, you too had to learn how to fight with them. If you focused too much on either character, you'd likely fail in combat. The story in Neo Twooey is a little different. Nobody in the party is as antisocial as Neku was, but they're all very different people. They can work together at the start, but not super well. However, as the game progresses, they grow and come to understand each other better. At the same time, you learn how to utilize proper pin combinations to keep track of controlling everybody at once with their one button. They didn't just arbitrarily change from duos to larger groups to spice up the story, or give the game whatever combat system they could think of that would work well with a controller. Much like the original, they developed the combat and story such that they helped to emphasize the greatness of one another. The story and the combat wouldn't work as well if either were different. The combat itself is also just fun. It's fast-paced, it's frantic, there's lots of strategy involved. It's easier to learn than the original, but still hard to master. And the enemy design is amazing. They're varied in terms of visuals and attacks. The bosses are especially great. They all have interesting designs, attack patterns that are unique and fun to learn, and the ones later in the game offer a nice challenge without being too overwhelming. Just about anyone can set the game to easy and beat it, just as pretty much anyone can set the game to hard and not totally breeze through it. The other gameplay systems all tie into each other really nicely, and they're pretty deep. You can level up and evolve pins separately from your characters. You buy food to increase stats and eventually unlock new, better food items and the ability to quickly order what you did last time. You buy clothing, which works as armor, which can increase your brand VIP level. Or you can increase your VIP level by winning battles with gear from that brand. And as your VIP level increases, you unlock more, better gear, and sometimes more pins. There are just lots of layered, interconnected, interesting mechanics. And you don't have to dive deep into them if you don't want to, but if you do, it's very rewarding. There's lots of stuff to discover, and it's all really satisfying. I beat the main story with about 30 hours of playtime, but I didn't reach 100% until I nearly hit 80 hours of playtime. Normally, I don't 100% complete games like this, The grind usually seems like it'll be too much. But this game is just so fun that I didn't want to stop playing. The story is just as good as the gameplay too. The writing captures the culture of the 2020s just as well as the original captured the culture of the 2000s. This may be the only game I've ever played with realistic text messages and modern slang that feels completely natural. The concept is as interesting as ever. The idea of the Reapers game is just so clever. There are tons of twists and turns, some of which you'll see coming but some of which will shock, and they all make sense. There's interesting lore you can dive deep into if you want, especially with the secret reports in the post-game, but you don't have to do so to hear a compelling narrative. There's great character development, I'd argue even better than the first game, thanks to the game's longer length. It never feels rushed. There are even interesting themes that are well developed, well delivered, and tied to the gameplay of the game, just like they did in the original. None of the choices they made felt like they were made just for fan service. They all made sense and contributed to a really interesting narrative. Playing this game does require a lot of reading, but it's absolutely a joy to take in this game's story. It is not very friendly for new players though. Stuff that happens in even the Switch re-releases new content is vital to fully understanding what's going on, but this isn't a bad thing. The first game is also excellent, so you should play it anyway. But if you want to get the most out of this game, you need to at least know the story of the original. I love pretty much everything about the character writing. Many characters have interesting quirks, like Susukichi and his obsession with Reversi, but even those characters aren't shallow. There are legitimately poignant moments with the guy that likes Reversi that are made better because you know the guy likes Reversi. The character growth in general feels a lot more natural here. As much as I love the first game, Neku starts out cartoonishly bad and totally grows out of it way too fast. Rindo, Fret, Nagi, and every other character, barring Minamimoto, who's still just a gimmick, albeit a really cool gimmick, all have struggles and issues that are much more relatable and understandable, and they overcome them in ways that totally make sense. Even the random NPCs have interesting backstories, names, and designs. This game is a social network mechanic, where a web connects every character you interact with and you can unlock new skills based on the connections you've made. This is both a clever way to implement a skill tree that's thematically and aesthetically relevant, and a great way of making this game Shibuya feel like a real place. Every character on the web, including characters that pop up for a single side quest, has a blurb describing them and their connections to others. The community conveyed by these NPC descriptions is believable, the connections run deep, and as a result you really come to appreciate the whole of Shibuya as a character as much as you do any party member. The characters aren't just well written though, their designs really are extraordinary. They're all distinct, original, not totally outlandish, and they convey many key character traits really gracefully. Things like Rindo's mask, Fret's plaid pants, and Nagi's oversized t-shirts contribute towards extremely memorable character designs that still feel fitting for normal teenagers and also help you understand how each character thinks. Even the random shopkeepers in this game all have designs better than that for any protagonist or antagonist from 99% of other games. The characters are all drawn in a really striking way too, with lots of thick outlines and sharp angles. Really everything is crafted in a truly striking way. This whole game looks gorgeous. I mean, just look at it. The style is insanely well executed and insanely appealing. It perfectly captures how the game plays and the mood of the story as well. The way every color pops, the way the whole mood alters when you scan, the way the buildings twist and morph in the background like they did in the first game but somehow perfectly captured in 3D. It's all legitimately breathtaking. Other games like Persona 5 and Jet Set Radio have amazing styles, but this game easily has the most incredible style I've seen in any game. The game's performance is also great. I experienced fast loading times, no framerate drops, and no resolution drops on PS5. And I saw some framerate drops while playing through the demo on Switch, but nothing too bad. I haven't even talked about what may be my favorite part of this game yet. The soundtrack of The First World Ends With You is iconic, and I thought it'd be hard to top. But Neo's soundtrack blows it out of the water. If you chose any 10 songs from this game's soundtrack completely randomly, and that became the new soundtrack for the entire game, it'd still at least be the best soundtrack of the year. But there are a whopping 51 songs spanning tons of genres and vocalists, and each and every one is amazing. Almost every remix of a song from the original game surpasses the original version, and almost every new song is better than even the best songs from the first game. I think I can already call this my favorite game soundtrack of all time, and I know many of these songs will be stuck in my head for years. The music is experimental, it's unique, it's fun to listen to, and it fits the game style perfectly. That's the amazing thing about Untitled World Ends With You. The gameplay, the music, the story, and the visuals are all top-notch stuff individually, but they also perfectly synergize together. They all contribute to making what I view as one of the most perfect games ever created, just that much more perfect. The sum of this game's parts would be incredible itself, but this game is somehow more than that sum. If you haven't given this incredible series a shot, do yourself a favor and start playing The World Ends With You as soon as possible. Well, that does it for my review. If you liked this video, I'd really appreciate it if you liked, commented, hit the notification bell, and or subscribed. I'd also recommend to check out some of my other content, like my review of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. Thank you all for watching, have a great rest of your day.